listen. There'll never be no comparison. You're live on the show. Sit back and have a listen. All right. LDBC. This is your boy, Coach Shelton Harrison. You're live on the Coach Shelton Harrison Boxing and MMA Show live. All right, guys, got a very special guest for y'all today. You know, I've been trying to get this gentleman to, come on and, have a conversation with me about a lot of different things he's doing. But, guys, I got Roger Allen. Roger Allen on the phone. He's manager to Valentina and Antonina Shevchenko. Roger, how you doing this evening, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad we finally got to connect.
Hey, man, I'm glad we got to finally connect, man. So, basically, man, let's just go ahead. I just want to kind of start it off, man. How in the world did you get to know Valentina and Antonina Shevchenko?
Well, I'll kind of tell you. I've been a martial artist pretty much my whole life, and I was training BJJ out of Houston here, a gym called Gracie Baja, Texas, and one of my teammates, he was from Peru. And so through the course of training together, we got to be friends, and I started managing the athletes out of our gym for amateur and professional fights, and over time, and so some of our athletes actually started training at he and his wife's gym. They have a gym called Etrafit. Valentina, she trains there quite often as well. So does Antonina, and so. He mentioned, he said, look, I have this tremendous athlete. She's a world champion coming in, and that's when she was coming in. I think she came in about 2010 to fight Liz Carmouche. I believe that was at that time. So he was working with her a little bit, and so she came and left the country, and time passed, and during that time they said, hey, look, if you can, try to find Valentina fight. This is years later. She actually had a manager here in the States, and they weren't able to get her fights. And so I knew some of the promoters, and I started asking around from some of my previous relationships. And in 2014, Valentina was fighting over in China. She fought in the Kunlun tournament, the 60 kg tournament over there, and she won that tournament, and she won the final in dramatic fashion. She knocked out her opponent in I believe it was the first round. And so one of the guys that I'd been working with, McMaynard, with Legacy, he and I talked, and he ended up having her over here and signed her to a multi-fight contract. And kind of the rest is history. Along the way, trying to get her fights in the U.S. was kind of interesting. Talking to different promoters. Back then, very, very naive kind of to the fact that when people say they'll fight anybody, anywhere, anytime, that's really not the case. There's very, very few fighters that will actually do it. A lot will say it. Very few will actually do it. I mean, we had it here in Houston. When that's where I'm from, that's where the promotion was out of. And, we even tried to get Holly matched up with Valentina here for Legacy at the time. But Holly was their premier athlete, and they were trying to get her to the UFC. And they were having a very difficult time finding an opponent for Holly. Won it towards the end, and we offered up Valentina, and her management team decided that wasn't a good idea with the timing. And so the rest of the history. Shortly after, Holly went up to UFC, Valentina signed with Legacy, fought as their premier athlete, and from there our goal was to get her in the UFC and have her fight Holly again.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, she fought Holly. But, man, you brought up an interesting fact, man. I want to ask you about Liz Carmouche because, there are fans that are still trying to find the fight. So, if you could, break down what happened in that fight, because I think people really misunderstand that loss to Liz Carmouche.
Well, there's some interesting, it's kind of senseless to go back that far and dwell on it, but I mean, I can give you kind of a quick overview. But what's interesting that most people don't know is, and I really didn't know this till later on, is originally Valentina was told she was coming over here to do a Muay Thai fight. She really hadn't done much prep for MMA. She had, I think, about 14-day MMA camp for that fight, which that's neither really here nor there. I mean, she's a champion. She's a gamer. She went and fought. She was actually dominating that fight, and she got cut. And toward in the fight, she went for a leg lock, got cut, and in between rounds, the referees they stopped. Because of the cut. And back then, I'm sure if it was, I'm sure they weren't used to seeing ladies cut that quite, anything like that. And again, I could be 100%, mistaken on that. But anyway, she wasn't fighting in friendly territory, and it is what it is. But she's already addressed it. She said, if they fight again, it'll, she doesn't care. She'll fight anybody, anywhere.
Yeah, that's the kind of attitude that when I got the interview with Antonita, that's the kind of attitude that they portray. They'll fight anybody, and they don't care. So these girls, Valentina and Antonita, they've had pretty extensive training in all different aspects of martial arts. Like, could you talk about like their backgrounds in specific, like what kind of like actual training that these girls have?
Well, again, I'm not going to say anything that Valentina hasn't said. It's kind of, maybe I'll just be the central point. But, she started at a very young age. At 5 years old, she started out, in Taekwondo. And from there, the coach that she has today, I mean, he was kind of a pioneer in that part of the world. He kind of had a vision about creating a universal martial artist. So it wasn't specifically like, okay, we're going to train, just Taekwondo or just boxing. As he's an interesting character and a story on his own of his background. He's a tremendous coach. His background started young in boxing, went to Sambo, went to karate, went to Taekwondo, and essentially, he had a vision, traveled the world to train with different people. He's trained, really all over the world as a young man, and he kind of implemented a lot of that into both Antonina and Valentina's training. So along the way, literally they started out to being MMA fighters at a very, very young age, probably about 9 or so. They 8, 9, they were training probably everything, and they competed in everything. And over in where they're from in Kyrgyzstan, that was a Soviet bloc country, after the fall of the Soviet Union. But traditionally, still, all those countries over there have sports ministries. So the sports ministries and arts, they fund the programs over there in each country, like, for example, boxing, Taekwondo, or Muay Thai, and her coach actually founded the Muay Thai Federation in Kyrgyzstan. So, so any of these young athletes or anyone that has their children involved in these programs, it doesn't cost them anything. It doesn't cost anything to compete. All that's funded by the state. So, of course, she could train, both athletes could train and compete quite a bit, and they did. Their whole lives, they may go to a Taekwondo tournament here, they may go to a boxing tournament there, they may go to a judo tournament here, they may go to a Sambo tournament here. That was their whole life. They, literally have competed their whole life. It's no joke when they say they have, I think Antonina has probably 450 amateur, competitive fights, and Valentina has probably mid 500, competitive fights, amateur fights. So it sounds, amazing, and but it really is amazing. It's not something someone here in the U.S. would be very difficult to relate to, just because of the cost and the opportunities. Kyrgyzstan, Valentina recently, she's had some podcasts, and she's opened up quite a bit, and she's told some interesting stories. And like, for example, Kyrgyzstan, their number one sports, their martial arts over there, some combat sports. So if they have fights, the cities literally, they shut down and everybody goes to the fights. And here it's football, soccer, baseball, hockey, all the big sports, basketball, they all draw all of our attention. So it's not specifically on combat sports.
Okay, so I guess I'm probably going to ask you about 2 or 3 questions in one. Okay, so speaking of that, Valentina, she trains, pretty hard with Coach Fedor, okay, and Coach Fedor, what integral part has Coach Fedor played in all this? Because he's sort of like you, he's the guy behind the scenes, he's doesn't talk very much to cameras. In fact, I've actually searched for interviews with Coach Fedor, and I can't seem to find them. Like, how does Coach operate in this capacity? Because does he sometimes damn, I'm coaching the world best, I'm about to coach, a world champion, and I'm coaching these 2 sisters that they've got all the skill set. I mean, how does Coach operate?
Well, Pavel, he's or Coach Bedotov, however you want to, I know him as a friend, and I'm just going to call him Pavel. So,
Yeah.
He has a long history. He and I are kind of, we're mature. Let me say that. So he's been doing this for quite some time, and he was kind of brought up, under the whole, kind of being humble as a true martial artist. He really, really is a martial artist. He has that philosophy. He's put that in his athletes, and so he's not, a braggart or someone that's going to boast or anything. He's kind of just let the results speak for themselves. And so, the results, if you kind of do research, I mean, there's several athletes that don't show up on the radar, but he has a lot of other athletes that have medaled with gold, silver, bronzes throughout many of the Muay Thai competitions. He has probably single-handedly, he has more than many of the teams throughout the world, out of the little country of out of Kyrgyzstan, and then training the girls out of Peru. So, but behind, just kind of let you know, I mean, he's very humble. He's a very, very intelligent guy. He's quiet. Valentina and Antonina, they talk about him. But he really, really is smart. I mean, you can see if you look at Valentina's fights, I think you've seen she's had really good game plans, and I think you're going to see a lot more from her in the future, and hopefully you'll see a lot more from him as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you about Coach's demeanor. As soon as she got done after the Nunes fight, was Coach disappointed? Was Coach, was he very positive? Like, what was Coach's feelings after Valentina fought Nunes?
Well, hopefully I'll put you two in contact, and maybe y'all can talk directly about it. I know as a team, together, the thought was, look, we're going back to work immediately and move forward. There's really, at the highest level, champions really don't sulk. They take it, they experience, and they move forward. I think Valentina has said in interviews, I mean, she gave that opportunity to Nunes to win, and she's not going to ever give that opportunity again, because Valentina is really, really a complete fighter. And, I think she learned some things from the fight. I think she's said that. Again, I'm not going to say anything that she hasn't said already. And realistically, if we go back kind of on the timeline of things, Valentina essentially went from basically a stand-up Muay Thai kickboxing career and jumped right into UFC. Took a short fight, on short notice with Kaufman. And then literally Valentina she was on vacation when she took that fight. She was in Bali. I contacted her by WhatsApp and through Facebook when we talked about the fight. So she took the fight literally. It was finalized, I think, about 8 days out. She was on a plane, came in, and had the fight, and then shortly after, she was fine, and once her, all of her period was over as far as no contact, whatever, we were speaking to the UFC, talking about the next fight, and they came back pretty quickly, and they said this, again, it was, I think, toward the end of January. They said, look, it's it's not an easy fight, but what do you think about Amanda Nunes? No one else in the division in the top 10 really want anything to do with her, and we're having a difficult getting her a fight. And Valentina said, yeah, sure, and stepped on a plane, went back to finish the vacation that she had. But of course, she was training while she was traveling, and then came back and we did a fight camp. Part of it was in Thailand, and then we finished up here in Houston, and then well, actually, I take that back. It all took place in Thailand, and they flew directly into Vegas. But and at that time, still relatively